Have you ever looked at someone's morning routine and thought, they've got everything under control, when in reality, they're one quiet collapse away from losing it all? Because if you had met Zini Sterling on that Thursday morning, you would have sworn she was unstoppable. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect plan. But perfection is just the most elegant disguise for pressure. The sound of running water echoed down the hall, coffee steamed on the counter, and 3 lives orbited around her like planets that forgot the sun burns too. Zeni didn't know it yet, but this morning would set off a chain of events that no analyst, no mother, no woman could predict. And you know what's wild? If I told you that one single decision, made out of love, would cost her everything she built, would you believe me? Stay right here, because once you hear what happened to her, you'll never see family the same way again. You think you know loyalty. Wait until you see what it looks like when it's weaponized. Now, before we go deeper, just hit subscribe right now, because by the time we reach the twist, you'll want to scream at the screen. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Let's rewind. Zeni Sterling was 52, but she wore discipline like jewelry. Every line on her face was a chart of endurance, every sigh a spreadsheet of sacrifices. She'd spent 3 decades predicting market shifts, but not once did she calculate the slow collapse of her own home. The kitchen was her stage of control. Coffee poured exactly to the brim. Toast aligned like soldiers. "Mom, can you spot me $1.5 until payday?" Her daughter Solange asked without even looking up from her phone. There it was. The usual transaction disguised as affection. Zeni didn't flinch. Didn't breathe too long on it. She just nodded, transferred, and kept scrambling eggs like it was nothing. You ever been so used to giving that it doesn't even sting anymore? That's the kind of numb that looks normal, until it kills you. Her husband, Langston, wandered in like a ghost of who he used to be. Robe, fatigue, resignation. The kind of man who once debated history but now just debated breakfast. "Morning," he muttered. Zeni didn't even look up. "Morning, I can't pick you up later. I have a meeting with clients at 6. He sighed, the kind of sigh that carries years of silence. And there it was. The daily play. Everyone talking, no one listening. Everyone asking, no one giving back. Solange scrolled. Akira burst in like a new tab opening in a crashing browser. "Mom, you're the best. Thanks for the transfer. I'm starting a new job tomorrow. Again, new job. New promise, same cows." Zeni's smile was practiced. Sharp, tight, polite. The kind that hides the scream beneath. If you've ever been the person holding your whole family together, you already know this story. Except you don't. Because Zeni wasn't just holding them together. She was financing their illusion. Fast forward to the office. Rows of glass, buzzing phones, and a skyline that promised reward for anyone ruthless enough to take it. Zeni was good at numbers, but terrible at boundaries. When her boss dropped another client file on her desk, she didn't say no. She never did. She'd been trained to earn love through labor, respect through exhaustion. By the time the sun set, she'd handled 3 markets, 1 overdue loan, Akira's, of Corsi, and a call from her nephew's school about behavioral issues. Her life was everyone's problem, except her own. On the train home, her reflection in the window looked like someone she used to be. Behind her phone screen, paradise flashed, an ad for the Maldives. Turquoise water, white sands, smiles of families with no spreadsheets in sight. And for the first time in years, she thought, maybe they deserve this. Maybe I do too. That single maybe would cost her everything. Cut to midnight. The house was quiet. Langston's note on the counter went to alumni gathering back late. Chicken still frozen, plants still thirsty. Zeni cleaned up because of course she did. By 20:43 a.m., she was hunched over her laptop, calculating how many weekends she'd need to sacrifice to afford a luxury that would finally make her family smile. She worked the math like it was salvation. If she skipped the bathroom renovation, picked up 2 extra clients, and stopped sleeping, the trip would be paid for by May. And for what? For a fantasy, for gratitude that never came, for thanks, Mom. Text followed by new requests for money. But here's the thing about overachievers. They always think one more effort will finally fix what's broken. Spoiler, it never does. March arrived like a breath she didn't have time to take. She booked everything. The overwater villa, the flights, the transfers, the insurance. Every click on that screen was a heartbeat. Every confirmation email was a promise that this will finally make them happy. When she finally announced the surprise, the reaction was everything she dreamed of. Solange screamed. Akira Googled. Langston smiled for the first time in months. And for a rare, fleeting second, Zenny believed it worked. But joy in her house always had an expiration date. Weeks passed. Solange spent more on swimsuits than gratitude. Akira researched how to snorkel like a pro, instead of paying off his last credit card. Langston complained about flying but never about freeloading. And Zenny, she became a ghost in her own life. Living on caffeine, working through weekends, counting down the days until she could finally exhale in paradise. But paradise doesn't wait for people who forget themselves. The first symptom came quietly. A tingling in her right arm. A whisper from her body saying, "Stop." She didn't. Because strong people always think exhaustion is temporary. Until it isn't. 3 days before the flight, she woke up with a head full of fog. By the time she reached the kitchen, her body had declared bankruptcy. The knife slipped from her fingers. Her knees gave way. Her world tilted. And as she fell, all she could think was, "The eggs are burning." That's how conditioned she was to keep serving, even as she broke. Langston's panicked voice, Solange's scream, the sound of sirens. These were the new background music of her life. The diagnosis, stroke. The prognosis, uncertain. And the irony, she'd spent her life calculating risks for others, yet never noticed the one killing her from within. When she opened her eyes in the hospital, the world had changed. Half her body refused to move. Half her voice refused to form words. But she was alive enough to witness what came next. And trust me, it's worse than you think. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from enemies, it wears your last name. Langston arrived first, he looked relieved. Solange followed, dressed for brunch rather than grief. Akira kept checking his phone. And then, the words that should never exist in the same room as a hospital bed. "So, what about the Maldives?" Pause. "You ever hear your heart break so loud it silences the machines?" She did. Langston cleared his throat. "We thought maybe we'd still go. Everything's already paid. You should rest, baby. You should rest. Translation, we're going without you." Zenny couldn't move, but her mind screamed. Then he handed her a pen. "Just sign this power of attorney. For convenience." Oh, convenience. The word thieves use when they're robbing the willing. And she signed. Because what else could a paralyzed woman do? At that moment, the strongest person in the room was the one who couldn't stand. When they left, laughter echoing down the hallway, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was revelation. Years of sacrifice condensed into one brutal truth. She had raised consumers, not companions, dependents, not descendants. That night, staring at the ceiling, Zenny didn't cry. She calculated. Not finances this time, freedom. Because here's the secret no one tells you about hitting rock bottom. It's a perfect foundation to rebuild from. And what she did next would rewrite the definition of revenge. Do you see it yet? The twist hiding in plain sight? The moment a victim becomes the variable no one can predict. We're only getting started. Because the woman they left behind, she's about to become someone they'll never recognize. People talk about second chances like they're gifts. They're not. They're invoices from the universe. Proof you still owe something to yourself. Zenny Sterling didn't die that day, though it might have been easier if she had. Because waking up meant remembering everything, the laughter, the signatures, the betrayal. Every beep of the hospital monitor was a metronome for anger. You know that quiet kind of rage? The one that hums behind your ribs like an engine idling. That's what she became. 3 weeks in rehab. 3 weeks of learning how to walk again, talk again, trust again. Nurses whispered about her progress, called her miraculous. But miracles are just math you don't understand yet. Zenny was calculating something bigger. Each time her hand shook during therapy, she whispered steady. Not because she feared weakness, but because she was memorizing it. Weakness is data. Pain is research. And when the doctor said, "You'll be back to yourself in no time," she smiled. Because herself was gone. She was building someone new. Langston didn't visit after week 1. Solange sent flowers. Digitally, of course. Akira posted a motivational quote about self-care, with a caption that read "Family first." family first. The hypocrisy of it almost made her laugh. While they sipped cocktails in paradise, Zini was learning to lift her own spoon. But between every repetition, between every trimmer, she was writing a new algorithm in her mind. Never again will I fund betrayal. Never again will I earn love through sacrifice. Revenge, not yet. First, recovery. Because patience is the most dangerous form of power. By month 2, she could walk unassisted. By month 3, she was reading again. This time, legal documents instead of emails. And buried in those endless hospital forms was something curious, a discrepancy in the insurance payout. A transaction authorized by Langston Sterling, using her digital signature. The Maldives weren't the only thing they'd cashed in. He'd liquidated her investment account too. Her retirement fund gone. Her emergency savings converted. Everything she'd built, siphoned under the title marital consolidation. And suddenly the stroke didn't feel like an accident anymore. That night, she stared at the ceiling of the rehab center, tracing cracks like constellations. Some people see cracks and think damage. She saw maps. Every line pointed to a new version of herself, one that would never beg for gratitude again. She requested early discharge. The nurse protested. You're not ready. Zeni's voice was steady now, calm as arithmetic. I'm not staying where people call surviving an achievement. They signed her out. She walked out. Slow, deliberate, each step a quiet declaration. I'm coming for my life back. Home looked smaller. Dust on the counters, unopened mail, empty fridge. Her plants were dead, the same ones she used to water between spreadsheets. She stood there for a full minute, letting the silence settle like a verdict. On the table sat a framed photo. Langston, Solange, Akira, all tanned and smiling under a sunset she paid for. She turned it face down, then opened her laptop. The passwords had been changed, bank accounts locked, her name missing from joint accounts. But here's the thing about analysts, they never forget patterns. Langston reused his work password for everything. And guess who still had access to his old company inbox? Within hours, she had more than she expected: invoices, hidden transfers, emails between Langston and a consultant named Marla Gaines. Marla wasn't a consultant. She was his mistress and his co-conspirator. The irony. Zeni had met Marla once, at a Christmas party. The woman who complimented her earrings while planning to steal her future. You ever realize the villain was smiling beside you the whole time? That's a special kind of nausea. Zeni didn't scream. She didn't rage. She brewed tea, sat in the same chair where she once budgeted for love, and she wrote down 3 words on a sticky note to reclaim. Rebuild. Return. That became her creed. Step 1 at reclaim. She started with her mind, signed up for neuro rehab workshops, studied cognitive resilience, rewired herself with the same discipline she once used to please others. Step 2, rebuild. She freelanced quietly under an alias, using her network to secure private clients. Money trickled in, then flowed. Step 3, return. Not home, not to them, but to the battlefield they never knew she controlled. Information. Because data was her true inheritance, and now she would weaponize it. 6 months later, the world thought Zeni had vanished. Langston, meanwhile, flaunted his consulting firm online, built on the capital he stole from her. Solange bragged about joining as creative director. Akira was managing corporations. And the internet loved the perfect entrepreneurial family. Perfect facade, again. But algorithms have ghosts, and Zeni was the best ghost in finance. She built a quiet digital persona, Nova Care, an investor from Singapore. Nova started showing interest in Langston's firm. Big money, serious tone, irresistible bait. You ever watch a spider weave a web so gently you forget it's a trap? That was Zeni. Langston responded immediately. Emails turned to calls. Calls turned to virtual meetings. He bragged, exaggerated, sold futures he didn't understand. Zeni listened. Recorded, archived. Every lie, every falsified document, every wire transfer. Collected. And when she finally said, I'd like to see your detailed financials before investing $5 million, he practically drooled through the phone. He sent the files. She opened them. There it was: confirmation of laundering, falsified tax statements, client misrepresentation. He was sitting on a legal minefield and didn't even know who built it. The woman he betrayed was now the investor who would destroy him. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of exposing him immediately, she waited. Because revenge served raw only satisfies hunger. Revenge served precise rewrites destiny. So she created a plan that wasn't about punishment. It was about education. About showing every parasite in her life what dependency really costs. Step 1 is Solange. Zini found her influencer accounts. The sponsored posts, the luxury ads. She contacted one of the brands anonymously. Sent proof Solange was using fake engagement. Campaign cancelled. Sponsorship revoked. Solange posted a crying selfie 2 days later with the caption, "Sometimes the universe tests you." Oh, sweetheart. The universe had nothing to do with it. Step 2 Akira. He'd started dabbling in crypto consulting. Zini traced his wallets, discovered his pump and dump scheme, and sent an anonymous tip to his biggest client. By morning, his accounts were frozen. Step 3 Langston. He was about to announce a merger on live webinar. NovaCare scheduled a final due diligence meeting minutes before broadcast. He joined confident, rehearsed, smug, and then she spoke. Not as Nova, as Zini. "Hello, Langston. Surprised to hear my voice." The silence that followed was the loudest sound he'd ever made. You could see it in his eyes. Recognition followed by terror. He stammered. "Zini, I thought." "You thought I'd stay broken?" She interrupted. "You were half right." Then she shared her screen bank statements, messages, photos. Evidence. He reached for words like drowning men reach for air. She leaned closer to the camera. "You wanted convenience. Here's mine. I've already filed everything with the authorities. But I'm generous, Langston. You have 24 hours to confess publicly before the headlines do it for you." Click. End call. He tried to call back. She didn't answer. Instead, she emailed him a quote she used to keep on her office wall. "Trust is built in drops and lost in buckets." Then she poured the whole bucket out. The next morning, social feeds erupted. Langston Sterling's firm. Under investigation. Solange. Issued public apology. Akira. Missing from the internet entirely. The family empire crumbled in real time, pixel by pixel. And where was Zini? Sitting by the window, sipping coffee from the same cup she used the day of her stroke. Different hand. Same calm. You might think that's the end. That justice is the final chapter. But survival stories rarely end at justice. They end at choice. Because when the dust settled, reporters begged for her side. Lawyers offered settlements. Even Solange left a voicemail. Tearful, Inkohani listened. Deleted it. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Forgiveness isn't a return to ignorance, it's a refusal to rent space to ghosts. She packed her bags, donated what was left of the house, and disappeared from the city that mistook her silence for weakness. No press release. No victory post. Just a woman walking toward the airport with nothing but peace and a new passport. But if you think she vanished completely, you'd be wrong. Because 6 months later, a quiet philanthropic fund appeared online. The Sterling Initiative, supporting women recovering from financial abuse. Founder anonymous. But anyone who'd ever met Zini would recognize the precision in its spreadsheets. And somewhere, across the ocean, a woman in a linen dress sipped her coffee at sunrise, eyes steady on the horizon, whispering, "Never again will I apologize for surviving better than they planned." Do you see it now? How sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the best audit of your life. That tragedy, under review, is just transformation written in a different font. Because Zini Sterling didn't lose everything. She liquidated her illusions. And what she gained can't be measured in dollars. She gained herself. There's a saying that you don't really change until you can look at yourself and not flinch. Zini Sterling was learning to stare. The woman in the mirror wasn't the same one who had begged for approval, signed over her future, or waited for someone else to define her worth. This new reflection had quiet edges. Soft voice, sharp eyes. Calm wasn't weakness anymore. It was the sound of boundaries closing. But peace, like any currency, attracts its own kind of inflation. The more you have, the more life tests how badly you'll fight to keep it. Zini thought she'd escaped her past, yet the world has a way of mailing you the receipts for lessons you haven't finished paying for. One morning, a message arrived in her encrypted inbox. No sender name, just a line of text. "We know who you are, Nova." She froze. It wasn't fear. It was memory. The kind of stillness that happens when instinct catches up before logic does. For months, she had operated on her new alias, quietly investing, quietly giving, quietly healing. No trace, no trail. So how could anyone know? She traced the message's metadata. an old skill that came back like muscle memory. Location tag New York. Origin public Wi-Fi Midtown. Attached file blank PDF. Blank except for one hidden line of code that, when decrypted, read, "Let's talk about Langston." She closed her laptop, heartbeat steady. Not panic. Calculation. The old her would have called someone, sought advice, written a checklist. The new her brewed coffee, took a walk, and thought. If this was blackmail, it was weak. If it was curiosity, it was dangerous. But if it was a mirror, she was ready to look. 2 days later, she arranged a meeting through one of her fund's shell correspondents. Public place, crowded cafe, nothing traceable. The person who showed up wasn't who she expected. A woman, mid-30s. Calm. A kind of practiced stillness, like someone trained to measure her words. She introduced herself as Amira Voss. "I used to work with your husband," she said. Zinni sipped her tea, unbothered. "Ex-husband." Amira smiled. "Wes, I assumed." Amira explained she'd been Langston's assistant until he disappeared after the investigation. "He's been in Bali," she said. "But that's not why I reached out. You see, he left something behind, something you might want to see." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a photograph, Langston sitting on a beach, holding a child. A girl, maybe 4 years old. On the back, "Her name is Lani." Zinni blinked slowly. The math rearranged itself in her mind. Langston a child. Post-betrayal timeline. Impossible. And yet completely predictable. You ever feel your heart harden in real time? That was her. Not from pain. Just clarity. Some betrayals echo long after you stop caring. She thanked Amira, pocketed the photo, and left. But that night, lying awake in a city apartment, where no one knew her name, she couldn't silence one question. What if Lani isn't his punishment but his redemption? And there it was again. Compassion, sneaking through the cracks of her armor. Because no matter how far you evolve, empathy doesn't die, it just changes its shape. Weeks passed. Zinni immersed herself in work, building a financial literacy platform for women, discreetly expanding her philanthropic reach. The Sterling initiative grew quietly viral, anonymous yet everywhere. Videos circulated. Testimonies spread. Someone out there understands what it's like to rebuild from nothing, one woman said in an interview. Zinni smiled behind the screen. Purpose was a better fuel than revenge ever was. But fate wasn't done testing her balance. An email came from an unexpected source, Solange Sterling. Subject liner, please. The body of the message read, "I don't know if you'll read this. I deserve everything that happened. But Akira's missing. Dad's sick. I'm lost. I need help." Zinni closed her eyes. There it was. The old trigger dressed in new words. "I need help." She almost deleted it. Almost. But then she remembered the girl in the photo. Lani. Children inherit silence before they inherit wisdom. If she stayed quiet, another generation might learn that love means dependency. And Zinni had promised herself, never again. She replied 12 words only. "Meet me where it all began. Sunday. Don't be late." Where was obvious. The old family house. The one she'd donated, still under renovation by the nonprofit she'd funded anonymously. Sunday morning. She arrived early. Sunlight fractured through broken windows like mercy sneaking into ruin. Solange arrived next. No makeup, no filters, no entourage. Just exhaustion in human form. For a moment, they just stood there. Mother. Strangers bound by shared ghosts. Then Solange broke. "I'm sorry, I didn't know how bad it was. Dad made it sound like." Zinni interrupted softly, like I was the villain. Solange nodded, crying. Zinni sighed, not out of anger, but release. "You believed what was easiest. That's what children do." They sat amid dust and echoes. Zinni listened as Solange confessed. How Langston fled after the scandal, how Akira got entangled with the wrong investors, how the world they built on lies collapsed from within. Zinni didn't interrupt once. Finally, Solange whispered, "How did you survive it?" Zinni smiled faintly. "By not mistaking endurance for love." That line hit harder than any lecture could. They talked for hours. By noon, the air between them had softened. Not forgiveness, understanding. And as Solange prepared to leave, she turned back and said, "Mum, there's something else. There's a woman named Marla Gaines trying to reach you. She says she's dying." The name dropped like a stone into still water. Marla, the mistress. The final unclosed chapter. Zinni nodded. If she's dying, then she's finally ready to tell the truth. 2 days later, the call came. Hospital. Private room. Zini entered quietly, the air thick with antiseptic and unfinished apologies. Marla looked fragile. Oxygen tubes, trembling hands, eyes dimmed by time and regret. You came, she whispered. Zeni's voice was steady. You asked. Marla gestured weakly toward a small notebook on the bedside table. It's all in there, she said. Everything he planned. The money. The deal. The lie that nearly killed you. Zeni didn't touch it yet. She studied Marla instead. Why now? Marla's eyes filled. Because I thought I was winning. Then I realized I was just another version of you, used, discarded, replaced. You deserve better. As Zeni exhaled slowly. For a moment, neither spoke. Forgiveness wasn't in the air, but closure was. She picked up the notebook. Rest, she said quietly. The debt is cleared. Marla smiled weakly. That's what I wanted to hear. She passed hours later. Zini walked out of the hospital and didn't look back. The notebook contained details she could have used to destroy what was left of Langston's life. She didn't. Instead, she locked it in a safe deposit box and wrote one final entry on its last page. The difference between revenge and release is knowing when to stop. Months later, rumors spread that Langston had returned to the US bankrupt. Alone, he'd started teaching economics at a community college under a different name. Zini heard, smiled, and did nothing. Because sometimes the truest form of victory is silence. By the end of that year, the Sterling Initiative had transformed from a whisper campaign to a global movement. Documentaries called it the Quiet Revolution. Women quoted her anonymous posts. Financial independence became viral, and no one knew the founder had once been a ghost in her own home. Every time she saw the growth charts, she thought, this is the mirror strategy. Not fighting the reflection, redefining it. Because what she learned in that hospital bed wasn't vengeance. It was awareness. The realization that you can't heal in the same place you were trained to disappear. One night, at a small conference in Lisbon, she sat anonymously in the audience while a young woman spoke on stage about empowerment. Her closing words echoed through the room. Poor mothers walk so we could rebuild. And for the first time in years, Zini allowed herself to cry. Not for loss, for completion. Do you see it now, DAR? How the mirror doesn't lie. It reflects the version of you brave enough to start again. How sometimes the most radical revenge is peace that can't be purchased, stolen, or signed away. Zini Sterling didn't win by destroying anyone. She won by becoming someone no betrayal could ever afford.